Mr. Brian, thanks. And DCGS, ladies and gentlemen, it's a joy to be here. For those of you who don't know me, I am Major General Nick Pope, failed economist. I am also the Director of Capability and therefore the purveyor of gladness, the deliverer of sunlit uplands. I'm a cup half full man for the Army. I was dwelling actually earlier on some of the comments made by speakers both yesterday and today, and if I could share two pastiches from my last 2 weekends. And the first relates to JNCO competency and the remarks of the Army Sergeant Major. And I was at Blandford Forum in Dorset as the Master of Signals, the head of one of our technical corps. And I was standing in front of a parade of about 1,500 people, regular, reserve, and retired. The 3 R's bringing the 3 R's together. And having inspected the parade in frock coat, I came back to the dais and a microphone was placed in front of me so I could impart words of wisdom to those gathered on information dominance, information maneuver, big data, the Internet of Things, and all those great cries we've talked about earlier. And I leant forward to speak, and nothing happened. And I leant forward again, and nothing happened. So being a technical senior officer, I did what all technical senior officers would do. I tapped the microphone. Nothing happened. I brought the microphone closer to my face. Nothing happened. And at this point, I thought there's been a technical foul-up. Out from the serried ranks marches a very smart, resplendent junior non-commissioned officer. And he marches towards me, I think, to take the microphone away and replace it. Oh, no. He turned the on switch to on. Our JNCOs are coming from a fine stock. The second pastiche actually relates back to the comments that Julia Richardson was making on the earlier lecture today about neural networking and the brain function. And funny enough, last weekend, a chum of mine, Sam Dutton, who's an Australian, was staying over for the weekend. And Sam works for Google, and he works on the brain function. And so I had kind of that talk firsthand from somebody who is academically, particularly in a different league from me. But we then left the house to go to the Chalk Valley History Festival, and Sam got lost. And my message from that is, you can have a very, very good brain, but you need to be part of this whole pan-DLOT approach to delivering capability. And clearly Sam wasn't there. I looked a bit today at the audience to do some audience segmentation. Who is the audience I'm speaking to? Broadly, it's 50% UK Home Military. It's about 15% foreign national armies and navies and air forces. It's about 10% from academia and from the media, and it's about 15% from industry. And many of the remarks I am going to make during the next 8 or 9 minutes or so relate to that industrial engagement aspect. So I want to talk about our modernization agenda. I want to talk about requirement setting and how we are starting to become an intelligent customer. And I want to ask about how industry may help us in this journey of exploration. And as part of that, I would coin a new phrase, and it's persistent industrial engagement, as opposed to persistent overseas engagement, or PIE, or PI for short. A bit of history first. The McKinsey reforms of the late 1990s, which led to the creation of the centralized equipment capability customer, had 2 implications. On the plus side, it meant that we were better at specifying and giving adequate priority to those gaps between the services, logistics, C4, ISR, and the like. On the debit side, and at a stroke, the single services were disenfranchised. They became pressure groups, and they therefore had every reason to set the requirement bar at exquisite. Oh, and by the way, we took a 40% saving in manpower in that centralization process. In this era, performance, therefore, was fixed. Overall demand was unfettered, and the forward equipment program was overheated. The annual planning round became a game of delete, descope, and defer, with the delivery of timely capability being the most obvious casualty of war. Industry, you, mistrusted us, but also charged us continually for changing our mind, thereby exacerbating the situation. And this lasted for about 15 years. We had frontline commands who carried out the Baldrick mentality, say no to everything. We had frontline commands who concentrated, naturally and rightfully, on the operation and on the delivery of urgent operational requirements. It was a hand-to-mouth approach, focused on the short-term close battle. So we probably sacrificed PIE or PI on the altar of operational expediency. Or to put it another way, who ate all the pies? Something had to change. So fast forward to Levine and delegation and the alignment of responsibility and accountability and authority. In his 2011 report, Levine had the following to say on delegation. In the past, projects have been accepted into the department's equipment plan without adequate consideration of their requirement, affordability, and sequencing. This is what Bernard Gray referred to in his review as entryism. By passing responsibility for proposing new equipment to the commands, the incentives on their capability planners, i.e. me, to bid low is much reduced. The budget holder would have to find resources for any subsequent growth within their agreed delegation. Put it more simply, to maximize outputs, we must strive to be as cost-effective and as productive as possible. So as a capability planner, I want to get to a position where I can offer the ECAB, the Executive Committee of the Army Board, decisions that are conceptually led, strategically aligned, resource-aware, and evidence-based. 8 simple words, that's my theology for putting decisions to the board. And once the board has made a decision on where it wants to allocate its finite resources through a balance of investment process, more of which are none, I want to develop programs of change that are affordable and equally importantly, deliverable. There are some constraints, however, to doing this. We are where we are. We've embarked on the Army 2020 transformational process. We have an Army basing program. We have a force structure that has been undercapitalized for the last 15 years and is therefore in need of recapitalization. We have delivery organizations that are still in transformation, the DENS, ISS, and the DIO. We have a scrutiny and approvals process in place that places value for money and competition at the heart of the acquisition system. And we have existing contractual obligations, some of which are quite long-term. So our boundaries are in some ways prescribed. Within these boundaries, however, we are trying to construct a modernization agenda that I would declare to be both ambitious and deliverable. In many respects, having heard the earlier presenters, I am like that child in a sweetie shop. I want a bit of that, and a bit of that, and a whole bundle of that, and 3 kilograms of that, and I want it yesterday, to paraphrase Binny Connolly. But I also want capabilities that offer productivity. I want capabilities that, if not ubiquitous, then at least offer capability across a number of the operational scenarios that CGS described yesterday. Persistent overseas engagement, land joint strike, major combat operations, homeland resilience. We need capabilities that can operate routinely across those boundaries in output terms. So how do we go around doing this? Well, the good news is we don't start from a blank sheet of paper. We have a budget in the Army TLB of around £9 billion a year, of which some 60% is allocated to manpower costs, around 15% to activity costs, and around a quarter to modernization costs, the E&L, the equipment and logistic lines in the DLOD arsenal. So over a 10-year period, we have a program of, gusting £25 million to spend on new capabilities and sustaining current capabilities within the E and the L DLODs. The first thing we need to do, though, at ECAB is to work out how we spend that money at the macro level, balance of investment. And balance of investment, believe you me, is easier to say than to do, because it's quite difficult to measure a pound of armor against a pound of ISTAR, against a pound of aviation, against a pound of munition. So how do we do this? We have a variety of choices. We can do balance of investment by output, land joint strike, persistent engagement against homeland resilience. We can do balance of investment by the warfare challenges that HR alluded to yesterday. We can do balance of investment by function. E, L, training, manpower, simulation and the like. Or we can do balance of investment by a capability framework, combat support, joint fires, information and the like. And to help us do this, we have a number of tools that exist today. We have visual representation tools. We conduct gap analysis, we conduct capability audits, and we have analytical balance of investment tools such as equity. So we're not starting from a blank sheet of paper, but any extra help in this area would be gratefully received. Having done the balance of investment, we then turn these investment decisions into programs of change. And we give to a senior responsible officer or a program leader a mandate to deliver a program of change. And within that program, it's important to think about the requirement and requirement setting, because cost-informed decision-making is something that General Nick is particularly keen upon. And I think there are 3 or 4 principles that we need to think about to enable us to become best of class in this area. The first is a review of the PCT envelope. We must take time at the early stages of project formulation to understand fully the performance cost-time balance. It's a fact, it's a truism, for our current major programs across defense, some 80% of the costs have typically become embedded at the outset of a program, rightly or wrongly. Our tendency, therefore, has been to fix demanding requirements as soon as possible and then protect them at all costs. I think we must protect, or wrong, we must keep such requirements under constant review, especially at senior level. So key user requirements, which are notionally candidate at the initial gate of the approvals process, are not normally debated thereafter and become endorsed, or it feels like noted at main gate. By that stage, it's too late, and if you want to change your mind or you change your requirement, it's likely to need a rerun of the assessment phase, a collapse of the competition, or a delayed entry into service. To sum up, it's too late at main gate. CGS has also made it clear that in the future, our major programs will be sponsored at board level. SROs will be held to account for their relevant key user requirements and for controlling the PCT process. Hitherto, requirement setting has been done bottom-up and generally at relatively junior levels. Senior engagement and ownership, even for our most costly and risky programs, has been lacking, especially earlier on. So we've got to get into the habit and the mindset of being an informed customer and talking about requirements at board level earlier in the system. Thirdly, we've got to understand the pan-DLOD costs of our requirements. Sometimes requirements are argued on the basis of policy and planning assumptions, which in turn drives hard requirements, so it becomes a circular argument. In the absence of reliable cost data, it can be difficult to argue against these requirements, particularly if they're underpinned by some notion of sovereign industrial capability. We've also got to understand where the needs are in the performance-cost trade-off curve. I'm interested in an increase in 5% in capability, but I'm probably not interested in it if it has a cost hike of 50%. And understanding with industry where those cost hikes are in the curve is something that I'm very, very interested in. An activity in the equipment line of development can also introduce significant costs in other DLODs that may not be obvious at first blush. So we will have key user requirements for people, for infrastructure, for information and sustainment to draw such issues out. And let me give you some examples, therefore. When we talk about a protection requirement, I'm interested in armoured protection and the level. I'm interested in hard kill and soft kill DAS. I'll be interested in electromagnetic pulse, TREE, the transient effects of radiation. I might be interested in tempest. But I'm interested in the cost of all of those kinds of requirements. When I talk about environmental data, sometimes we buy equipment that is operating from -60 to +60 degrees centigrade. It's too expensive. So in sum, I think there are reasons for cautious optimism with regard to the future. Our modernization agenda is ambitious but deliverable. We have a board that cares about the long term and is willing to make the hard choices about resource allocation. And our industrial engagement strategy is maturing. To misquote the words of Trotsky, which was done regularly yesterday, if you don't go looking for your industrial business development manager, he will come looking for you. Thank you. Thank you.